Hey, what's happening, everybody? Brent Axe here from syracuse.com, and we are live here on the syracuse.com Syracuse basketball Facebook page, and we're coming off the heels of there's no other way to put it, folks. There is one word that certainly comes to mind following a 55-51 loss by Syracuse to Georgia Tech, and that word is brutal. A brutal game to watch, a brutal game to sit through, and a brutal loss for Syracuse. The calendar about to flip to February. Syracuse is now 15-7. They're 4-5 in ACC play. No one's packing it home yet. No one's saying let's take the rest of the year off and just forget about what's coming. But Syracuse is going to have an extremely tough road if they are going to stay in contention and in the conversation for the NCAA tournament, especially after not only what we have seen tonight, but what has just been a pattern for this team. They are, as Jim Boeheim said himself at his press conference following this game, a bad offensive team, really bad offensive team, and that has been the case pretty much consistently other than a few spots all year. But Syracuse managed to take it to a completely different level today, and that level was lower. Get on the elevator and push the down button. Syracuse shooting 30% tonight against Georgia Tech, 15 of 50. In this basketball game. Just an absolutely brutal offensive display for the Orange. So we're here. Hit that like button, hit that share button, let people know that we are here and chatting with you here on this Wednesday night following the Orange's 55-51 loss to Georgia Tech. I want to thank our friends, the Bill Rapp Superstore, for sponsoring our Facebook Live and our Syracuse Sports Podcast, a new Syracuse Sports Podcast coming out Thursday, by the way. So we would appreciate that if you could hit a subscribe in iTunes or Google Play. We got our new weekly podcast that comes out usually about Wednesday or Thursday. The podcast comes out, so would appreciate that. But for now, we are talking some Syracuse hoops. You guys get in the comments and do your thing there. We'll kind of check in on that as we're going. And news to report, if you did not see Jim Boeheim's press conference before this, he confirmed Howard Washington is out for the year. When asked about his status, we knew he got hurt at practice on Monday, heard the news Tuesday that he would not be traveling to Georgia Tech. Jim Boeheim just saying at his press conference moments ago that he is out permanently. He is out for the year. He didn't specify what the injury was. There's, certain things that, Jim said at his press conference. You got to be careful about how you reveal medical information, that'll inevitably get out in some form. That Howard Washington had some sort of leg injury. And I would imagine if you're out for the year, I don't want to speculate here, but, now you're talking about some sort of knee injury, some sort of tear, some sort of break in your leg. He left practice Monday with a big brace on his knee. So one way or the other, a Syracuse team that was already dangerously thin to start with. Matthew Moyer did play tonight. He didn't play a lot. He did travel. He is working his way back, but it is at guard where Syracuse needs depth. And this was a primary example of it tonight. Depth is not just to give players, a breather on the bench. It's not just to, have somebody come in so a Tyus Battle or a Frank Howard can sit for a few minutes. Depth is there if you have players struggling. And tonight, both of Syracuse's main scorers, their primary offensive threats, and the players you count on the most in that backcourt really struggled. Frank Howard and Tyus Battle combined in this game to shoot 8 of 34, 4 of 17 from three-point range. Tyus Battle did finish with 19 points, had 9 rebounds. 9 of his 19 points came at the free throw line. Frank Howard was 4 of 17. He was 2 of 9 from three-point range. The box score says 5 turnovers. It felt like a heck of a lot more than that. Sometimes you lose the ball, you lose the handle. Certain things are not kind of officially registered as a turnover. Bottom line, Frank Howard had an awful basketball game. And this is the primary example of where you need somebody off the bench so he can collect himself, so he can, Jim Boeheim certainly gave him an earful a lot in this game tonight, but you need somebody to just break up the rhythm. Howard Washington was the perfect example of that, but this team just has had a freakish amount of injuries. Barama Sidibe, remember, was this close. He came up right to the deadline of being declared a medical redshirt. What if that had happened for this team? Now you're in walk-on territory. You're going down to guys who are only there to kind of, round out the roster and help you at practice. So a dangerously thin team already, pushing that limit. Now we know Howard Washington's out for the year. and Syracuse has no depth at guard. You're talking about Braden Bayer, who is a walk-on, who's now the main guy to come off the bench at guard. Where's Geno Thorpe when you need him? And we never really got the story of why he left, but you kind of have to wonder what he's thinking right now, because he could have stepped in and kind of saved the day for this Orange team. He can shoot the three. He's somebody that Syracuse needed, but things didn't work out. He left, and now you got two guards you got to ride or die with, no matter how good or bad they're playing. And tonight was an example of just how bad things could go. There's something about Georgia Tech. They brought that up in the press conference. They said, you had a game like this here a couple of years ago. I think the final score of that game, off the top of my head, I think it was like 60-57. There's something about that building. Syracuse cannot shoot well there. Josh Okogie for Georgia Tech at 20 points. Tadrick Jackson, he killed Syracuse down low. He was finding holes in the back part of that zone all night long. He had about 4 or 5 plays just cut in there, had a lot of layups or reverse layups right around the basket. You remember Jackson came off the bench in last year's Georgia Tech win over Syracuse and had 20 points. He had 15 tonight, so Syracuse stopped that. Barama Sidibe had a huge game, of course, in Syracuse's win over Pittsburgh. Did not have quite that game tonight. Barama, limited action in this game. I'll check the box score while we're yapping about it here. He had 19 minutes, 3 points, 4 rebounds. Pascal Chukwu, 2 points, 4 rebounds tonight. Did not block a shot. That traditional Syracuse defense that gets a lot of blocks and gets a lot of steals. This was a defensive game in a way, but just 3 steals and 5 blocks for the Orange tonight. I mean, just to kind of compare and contrast, Pittsburgh, they had 11 blocks in that game, and Syracuse, one of the leading teams in the ACC in steals. They just didn't have it on the defensive end tonight, which is kind of ironic to say, given that this was a defensive game, but they, couldn't get turnovers, and points off turnovers was an important factor in this game because Georgia Tech had 14 points off turnovers. Syracuse had just 4 points off turnovers. Syracuse could not get into transition in this game. Georgia Tech had 16 fast break points. Syracuse just with 7 fast break points in this game. So, and Jim Boeheim mentioned it at his press conference. I've seen you guys make some comments about this. We were talking about it on the live chat too, about what is your offense? Syracuse they don't run set plays. There's no ball movement. It's a lot of ISO play. And, sometimes you can't tell whether Jim's being sarcastic or not, but he mentioned in his press conference that we don't run plays because we can't shoot the ball. So it's a lot of trying to get transition, trying to get guys off cuts and trying to get easy looks at the hoop. Well, even when they got that tonight, just could not shoot the basketball, could not get the ball to go in the basket tonight. And this has been an inept offensive team all year. And then tonight, just couldn't hit anything. So, folks, here it is, January 31st. Syracuse is 15-7. They're 4-5. And they're coming off a run here where we called it the taking care of business run, where you had 4 games, Pitt twice, BC, and this game, where you had to take care of business and at the very least go 3-1 in that stretch. Well, they did go 3-1 in that stretch, but now you're turning the page to February. You've got Virginia at home on Saturday, which, by the way Syracuse plays, their style, they're used to playing games in the 50s and 60s, good defensive play. If they can just get a little bit better on the offensive front, they know how to play Virginia's game. But Virginia's number 2 team in the country. They're coming off a win off of Duke recently, and that's going to be a hard ask for Syracuse to beat Virginia, even at home, even at the Carrier Dome on Saturday. You flip around quickly on Monday, and you take on Louisville. And then in no particular order, this is the month when all the heavyweights come in. You get Duke. North Carolina's been struggling lately, and you get them at home later this month, but they're still North Carolina. They're still a team that can come in and drop 80 points on you. And, Syracuse obviously have shown that they can't compete on the offensive side of the ball right now. You've got Miami this month. You've got Clemson coming up. That's your last game on the ACC slate. The point being, Syracuse is going to have a sore neck because they're looking up in the standings pretty much every game that's in front of them. There's another matchup with Boston College, and then there's a couple of games coming up. Joe Lunardi, ESPN's noted bracketologist, who frankly has been wrong on Syracuse the last 3 projections he's had on them, and to his credit, he's very self-deprecating about that. On Twitter, he'll recognize that. He wrote a column this week. Maybe some of you guys saw this on ESPN.com, and the question was what to do with Syracuse. Well, Syracuse does not have a signature win. They now have a bad loss on their resume in league play, with Georgia Tech. And if you can't score and they can't get this offense together, and we're about to hit the stretch run here, how are you going to get the noted signature wins that you need in tournament play? I mean, weird things have happened. There's a month to go, but this team is not building momentum. It's not building confidence on the offensive end. They're losing players. They're pushing the limit depth-wise. You know, we now know Howard Washington's gone for the year, as Jim Boeheim confirmed tonight. Matthew Moyer is slowly but surely working his way back into the lineup, but one way or the other, you only got, 6, 7 players that you can go with at this point. It would be one heck of a story if Syracuse could somehow find a way to stay in that conversation and grab a couple signature wins here in February, but it's also going to be a very tall task for this team at this point. So, we brought up some of the numbers and some of the stats in this game. The thing is, Georgia Tech didn't play that well offensively either. To answer your question, Dan, yes, it is. It is too late for Howard Washington to redshirt. He's played in, I believe, 18 games this year, so he is past the threshold. Howard Washington cannot medically redshirt. And, while we're on that subject, it's amazing, and I don't want to look too far ahead because we've still got this season to go, but it is amazing how deep this team is going to be next year. You're going to have, I think, more than likely Tyus Battle coming back. I wrote a piece about this on syracuse.com this week. Hope you guys got a chance to check it out. I'll throw it here in the comment section when we're done so you can read it just in case you haven't seen it. It's here on syracuse.com. Just look in the orange basketball section. But I talked to a scout that I speak with regularly. I call him the scout who knows, if you listen to my radio show. He said Tyus Battle is just not on the NBA radar were he to come out this year. There's concerns about his handle. There's concerns about a hitch in his shooting delivery. They say he's a really good college player. He's good for this team. But in a crowded field of, there's a lot of 6'6" guards that want to go to the NBA. There's nothing that stands out about Tyus Battle right now on the NBA level. If anything, he's going backwards. He needs another year to develop. I mean, he might still test the waters, and we'll see how that goes. Point being, if he comes back, you got Tyus Battle. I know Frank Howard has really been struggling lately, but with another year of seasoning and experience, you got him in the backcourt. If Howard Washington gets healthy, he comes back. Jalen Carey, the 4-star recruit, comes in next year. Buddy Boeheim comes in next year. He'll probably end up redshirting, but guy can shoot the lights out. Coach's son can really, hit that outside shot. And don't forget Elijah Hughes is sitting on the bench on this team. And, boy, that's frustrating because Syracuse does have another guard on this team. And he's pretty good, by the way. 6'6" player from East Carolina, can score, can shoot. He's a guy Syracuse could really need right now, but, that's how transfer rules go in college basketball. He's got to sit out a year. So then you bring back Moyer and O'Shea Brissett. Darius Bazley, who's one of the highest recruited players Syracuse has had in years. Merrick Dolezaj, Pascal Chukwu, Barama Sidibe, everybody back. Next year's team is loaded, absolutely loaded. But next year's next year. This year is this year. And Syracuse is going to struggle here going forward. And this was a game where they really struggled on the offensive end, but I started to mention it there a moment ago. Georgia Tech was awful on the offensive end. Okogie got open a few times. We mentioned how Jackson was getting open underneath, but it's not like Georgia Tech was shooting the lights out here. As bad as Syracuse was offensively, you look up, it's the end of the game. It's 55-51. Before that, it was a one-possession game. And just fitting in how this game went, Frank Howard dribbles off his foot, and Georgia Tech goes the other way. Turnovers. Tyus Battle had a key turnover coming down the stretch, trying to throw the ball up to O'Shea Brissett, top of the key, and Georgia Tech goes the other way. I mean, Syracuse just handed Georgia Tech too many opportunities. Syracuse is a good defensive team, even with its depth limitations, even with the players that they just don't have to rotate in and out. Not that Boeheim does it typically, but they had enough to kind of win this game the same way they've won a few games this year. Just scrap by, just ugly your way to a win. And Georgia Tech was a win. See, the problem with games like this, and we talked about it with Pittsburgh and Boston College, the problem with games like this is if you win, it's just kind of a win. You get another win in the standings, you get another win in ACC play, you would be 16 and 16 wins, and you'd be even in conference play. And remember when Syracuse was 1-4 in conference play, Jim Boeheim said, no big deal. It's early. We got 13 games to go. And, what me worry, he was like Alfred E. Newman. Syracuse evens its conference record at 4-4. Now they're 4-5. The problem with losing to a team like Georgia Tech, if you win, it's kind of like, okay, good for you. If you lose, now it's a bad loss. That's a bad loss on your NCAA tournament resume. It's a bad loss for the psyche of the team. It's just a bad loss all around. The word is brutal. The word of the day is brutal. So can you overcome it? Look, you can look at February one of two ways. You can look at February as you have opportunities. I mentioned all the teams Syracuse is playing. If you can beat Virginia, North Carolina at home, if you want to think optimistically, if you can somehow pull an upset over a team that I mentioned there, I mean, look, you can't say anything in pen in sports. You can't do it. But do you really believe this team can beat Duke? Do you really believe this team can beat Virginia on Saturday? Again, style of play is big in college basketball, and maybe that's how they can, stay in a game like that. And they're going to be pretty ticked off after this game. They're going to be pretty motivated. We'll see how the crowd is, because I think the Syracuse basketball crowd is kind of in that uh-oh moment right now. I think they kind of know that the season is slipping away if you're thinking about a season of, what your postseason aspirations are. But, Syracuse fans will show up. They'll be loud. They'll rally around this team. It's going to be one of the bigger crowds of the year, I would imagine. Big Saturday game against Virginia. But it is going to take a lot for this team to shake out of where they're at. I mean, and it's quite literally numbers. It's just literally they have 7 scholarship players. They lost one tonight, and you got to ride or die with the guys that you have. And that's a lot to ask for a team that is struggling on the offensive end. I mean, bottom line, you can't play this way and get the wins you need. You got to score 30%. That's really bad. That's the worst of this season. But this team is typically, not much better than that. It's not like we're all sitting here tonight talking about a team that went 15 of 50, 30%, and that's the standout. That's an anomaly. I mean, that's the worst they've shot this year, but that is on top of a lot of offensive performances where they're scrapping by. So how do they fix that? You got a month to go here. You kind of know what you are. And now opposing teams, knowing how limited Syracuse is, are going to attack them in a certain way. They know that Frank Howard is turning the ball over. They're going to go after him a certain way. Tyus Battle is kind of losing his handle. And I think the word that comes to mind is exposed. I think Syracuse, people just look at Syracuse and they just kind of know how to play him. You need extraordinary performances. O'Shea Brissett is a name that comes to mind. We haven't really talked about him yet because we focused a bit on Tyus Battle and Frank Howard. But, O'Shea tonight plays all 40 minutes. He had 11 points. He had 8 rebounds, second leading rebounder on this team. You got to give the kid credit for his hustle. Just 4 of 10 tonight, which, look, there's been games, just the last game, he went 4 of 16 or 5 of 15. You look at O'Shea's shooting stats, and they're typically like that. He only took 10 shots tonight, but you need more from O'Shea Brissett. You need more from him to counter what Tyus Battle and Frank Howard are doing. You just need that other option on offense because Syracuse just doesn't have it right now. Yeah, Merrick Dolezaj, I think it's one of the few positives in this game. He had 8 rebounds. He had 5 points. He had a great dunk, a couple great hustle plays. He logged 38 minutes in this game because Matthew Moyer just couldn't give it a go. He tried. He only played 2 minutes in this game. I really don't have a lot of faults with Merrick Dolezaj because he's a role player. You're not asking him to take a commanding lead. I think he could shoot a little bit more. I think he's got to take command a little bit more. I know they've been working with him. I mean, the guy takes I'm not throwing this number out there to sound like I'm exaggerating. He's literally taken 300 to 350 shots, either, add them up all at practice or afterwards. And they're working a lot with him in the high post. You get the ball, free throw line, and at least look for that shot. I think he's got to try and exert himself a little bit more on the offensive end. Because you need some kind of offense from somewhere. And when you have Frank Howard and Tyus Battle struggle, O'Shea Brissett just outside of a few plays, had a great hustle play late in the game and a great rebound, a couple good steals, but he's just not scoring enough. And that's a lot to ask of a freshman, by the way, to take command in that role. Syracuse just doesn't have that boost on offense. Boeheim brought it up at the press conference, and I haven't even mentioned it yet. We mentioned the down-low play mostly on defense, but you got nothing from Barama or Pascal down low tonight. And when and Ben Lammers didn't have a huge game for Georgia Tech, had a pretty good game. Let's see what he ended up with. This was a guy who, tonight ended up with 11 points and 12 rebounds. another double-double. He's had better games than that. Ben Lammers can flat out take over games. Ending up with 11 and 12, that's pretty good. We mentioned Okogie's 20 points, Jackson coming off the bench for 15. So what are you doing to counter that? Barama and Pascal just didn't have it tonight. And this is off a game where Barama Sidibe had 18 points and 16 rebounds. But it's a lot to ask a guy who's just getting into the rotation after sitting out with knee tendonitis to take over games on a consecutive basis. So Syracuse isn't quite a spot right now. There's no question about that. This Virginia game on Saturday, I mean, look, people in my line of work love to use things like must win and put titles on things, but Syracuse, as the great Yogi Berra said, it's getting late early for Syracuse if they want to stay in the NCAA tournament conversation. Joe Lunardi's going to drop them out of bracketology. They were quite literally the last team in, so they're out now, and they've got to find their way back. You got a month to go and a couple games in March, and then, of course, your bailout in the ACC tournament. But as we flip to February here, Syracuse is in a little bit of trouble, and they have got to find their way, and they've got to find their way with not a lot of options to do it. So just to kind of recap some of the big things here, of course, Syracuse loses 55-51. Tyus Battle and Frank Howard combined to go 8 of 34 shooting the ball. Syracuse overall 15 of 50 shooting the ball, 30%, their lowest output of the year. They're 21 points in the first half, tied for their lowest output in a half this year. They did that twice, once against Kansas, once against Notre Dame. It, believe it or not, was not their lowest scoring output of the year. That was 49 points against Notre Dame in a game that they lost by 2 in a game. Notre Dame, you want to talk about a team that's been just sacked by injury. Matt Farrell's out. Bonzie Colson's out. Hughes is out now for Notre Dame. And there's been a lot of injuries in this league. Clemson lost a key player. Notre Dame, Syracuse, as we know, has been hurt by injury. Finding out tonight that Howard Washington is now gone for the year. You look around the ACC, there's been injuries all over the place. I just can't remember a year in the league where so many key players went down. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that as a storyline here. And now Syracuse gets back at it Saturday against the number 2 team in the country, the best defensive team in college basketball. And they just went out there tonight against Georgia Tech and scored 51 points and shot 30%. And now you get Virginia. I think 4 words come to mind there, my friends. Good luck with that. That's when we'll talk again, though. Saturday, right here on our Facebook Live on the syracuse.com. Syracuse basketball Facebook page. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Appreciate that. Please read our coverage tomorrow. I'll have my recap up bright and early for you on Thursday morning, so please check that out. Other coverage, I mentioned my Tyus Battle article that I wrote this week, talked to an NBA scout, kind of looked around the NBA front right now. As you can imagine, not looking good if Tyus Battle has thoughts of leaving early this year. It's February tomorrow. As we speak, it's only January. Some of you may be watching this and it's February, so he has time to make up for that, but not on the radar right now. So check that out and all of our coverage of this game, and we will chat again here on Facebook Live and on the live chat Saturday, 4 o'clock tip, Syracuse, Virginia at the Carrier Dome. For now, enjoy the rest of your night, enjoy your Thursday, and we'll talk to you again. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight here on syracuse.com.